last Type Moon anime we looked at on this channel was an anime that doesn't exist. As far as adaptations go, saying that it was a disappointment would be the understatement of the century. It did leave me curious though, and when I heard that Fate Stay Night had its own controversial anime, I knew I had to check it out. So today, we're going to get to the bottom of 2006's Fate Stay Night anime. Is it really anime of the year 2006? Or just another terrible adaptation, fated to be forgotten? Fate Stay Night is a visual novel from 2004 by Type Moon. Visual novels aren't for everyone, so taking this and turning it into an action-packed anime was a no-brainer. The studio for the job this time around is Studio Dean. Studio Dean was founded in 1975 and has made a ton of anime, and I mean a ton. You probably know them from their work on series like Konosuba, Rurouni Kenshin, and Ranma. With a seasoned studio at the helm, it seems that the Fate series was in capable hands. Fate Stay Night has 3 story paths: the Fate route, the Unlimited Blade Works route, and the Heaven's Feel route. Each has their own corresponding main heroine, and while you might assume this just changes the girl Shiro, the story's main character, dates, you couldn't be more wrong. Each route starts the same but quickly branches off. Obviously, you can't cover 3 stories worth of content in one 24-episode anime, so Studio Dean opted to adapt the Fate route, the first and best route of the game, centered around series poster girl, Saber. Fate Stay Night is all about the Holy Grail War, an event where 7 magi, referred to as masters, summon servants, mythological and historical figures of old, to fight alongside them for a chance at obtaining the Holy Grail of legend that is said to grant any wish the user desires. Shiro Emiya is a teenage boy with some experience with magic, but by no means a fully fledged magus. He is thrusted into this war after accidentally seeing something he shouldn't have and summoning the servant Saber. As far as following the plot of the Fate route, the anime stays mostly faithful. The pacing is another story. Type Moon visual novels are carefully paced, slow burns. It establishes itself well, but goes on to drag in some parts and then go lightning fast in others. After a certain point, there isn't an episode that doesn't have a fight, or the aftermath of a fight, or the beginning of a fight. As a newcomer, I can only imagine how overwhelmed you'd be with these back-to-back battles. They do manage to cover all of the important plot points and hit most of the essential character moments, but they never really get any time to breathe. Shiro and Saber's relationship is the core of the Fate route, but because of its fast pace, it can sometimes feel like things are progressing unnaturally. The visual novel has the advantage of being told from the character's point of view. This adds a lot of flavor text, the narration, and inner thoughts to flesh out scenes. But since the anime is told from a non-point of view perspective, a lot of that nuance and finer details in the interpersonal relationships and characterization is lost. This is most apparent with our main duo. Because they can't rely on being in the character's head, the characters are a lot more forward with each other, and I feel like I was watching the SparkNotes version of a character arc. However, this is only because I know what I'm missing. A first-time viewer should have no problem with this. Although thanks to the rapid pace, I could see them getting tired of seeing Shiro putting others' well-being over his own for like the 5th episode in a row. With such a strong focus on fighting, one would assume the animation must be amazing. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but excluding a handful of fights, the animation is where the anime drops the ball the hardest. I'm no Jim Hendrix, but even I can tell something is up. It's aggressively mediocre most of the time. Not awful, but not to the level you would want when portraying these epic fights in animation. The word disappointing comes to mind, which can be worse than just being bad. However, there are a few key exceptions to this rule. The fight between Gilgamesh and Saber, Ryder and Saber, and the final fight are all amazing, and exactly what I would expect out of an anime adaptation of those scenes. The first use of Excalibur is so well done, and it's a shame the anime couldn't keep that level of consistency through its 24-episode runtime. The animation outside of the fighting is actually pretty good, and really enhances the comedic scenes. Whenever Taiga is on screen, for example, it's always a treat. Her scenes are animated with a ton of personality. And in my opinion, they're better than they were in the original. She is just simply an icon. My best guess for why most of the fights are so half-baked is not because of the direction, because the show can be jaw-dropping when it wants to. I can only guess it's a budget problem. There are a lot of battles in this anime, and to animate them all to a high quality across 24 episodes must have just been too expensive. But they did adapt all of the fights, and while they're not all bangers, at the very least, they're a consistent mediocrity. Time doesn't treat everything equally. What was once seen as cutting edge and revolutionary quickly becomes outdated. I was worried that this adaptation's art style wasn't going to hold up or be faithful to the original, but thankfully, that isn't the case. The anime takes Takeshi Takeuchi's art style and tweaks it a bit while staying true to the original designs. Despite the animation and fights being subpar, the characters never look off-model and all of their intricate details are preserved, down to the skirt frills. If you compare the original CGs from the game to the adapted scenes in the anime, you can really appreciate how close they got. There is a lack of silliness though. I was very disappointed I didn't get to see these Saber sprites adapted. Another point I can give to the anime is the depiction of violence. They don't shy away from it, which I feel a lesser adaptation would've. When Shiro gets stabbed by Ryder's dagger, it's just as gruesome as you'd expect, so I have to give them props for that. One of the animators must have really loved Ryder, because every time she's on screen, she looks amazing. It's almost absurd the amount of detail she gets over every other character. Maybe that's where most of the budget went. As for the special effects, they're fine for the most part, but really basic looking. Something that bothers me greatly was how Saber's sword was drawn. It wasn't. Look, she's not holding anything. How could they miss this? On a more positive note, the voice acting is fantastic. I was under the impression that Rialto Nua was the first time voices were put to the characters of Fate Stay Night, but this anime predates that version of the game. Not by a large margin, but the anime aired in 2006 and Rialto Nua released in April of 2007. But I think these had to have been worked on in parallel, because if you compare the voice acting between the two, it's exactly the same. If not the same, it's pretty darn close, but there is one glaring flaw to my theory. Berserker sounds completely different. For some reason in the anime, instead of sounding like this otherworldly monster, he gurgles and growls menacingly. I checked and it's the same voice actor, so I guess Type Moon didn't like the direction and re-recorded the voice lines for Rialto Nua. There is one egregious sin when it comes to the sound though. A sound effect, to be specific. When Saber swings her sword around, Studio Dean, in their infinite wisdom, thought using the Star Wars blaster sound effect was the perfect fit. I don't know how popular Star Wars is in Japan, but every time I heard this sound, it drove me up a wall. And it's not just swords. Apparently her kicks make those sounds too. This had to have been intentional, because when Saber and Shiro go to the movies, they're watching a Star Wars parody. I just don't understand. This is my personal version of the Berserk clang sound effect. To wrap this section about sound up, let's talk about the music. The music from this anime was composed by Kenji Kawai, and man, did he do an outstanding job. The animation might falter, but the score is always on point. There's a good mix of original tracks and game remixes. The theme you'll hear most is Unmei no Yoru. It's a wonderful track that fits right in with the tone and world of Fate. Although, admittedly, they do play it in nearly every episode, so you almost get sick of it, but thankfully, it doesn't reach that point, but it does get very, very close. The adaptations of the game's tracks are just as good, if not better, than the new ones. The standout by far is their rendition of Emiya. It improves upon the original in almost every way, and might just be the better version of the track. It's just so good. Adaptations often add something new to the piece of media they're adapting. These additions can be small inconsequential stuff, like content from a sequel being thrown in, or they could be big and change the story completely, like adding a new ending to better wrap things up. Fate Stay Night does both to varying degrees of success. Kiritsugu, for example, has more screen time, but not so much that it feels excessive. Fun fact, this anime also predates Fate Zero by a couple of months. So I wonder if his increased screen time was to get people interested in the prequel. There are a couple of other small scenes, like cutting to Sakura for her reaction to Ryder's death, for example. My favorite was showing Saber versus Mordred. As a fan of Arthurian lore, this was a nice surprise. Actually, all of Saber's flashbacks are handled extremely well and are a highlight of the series. It's small and appropriate fan service, but it certainly doesn't stay that way. This anime changes 3 major events in the Fate route. One is an expansion of a scene, one is a rewrite, and the other is a completely new scenario. The first and least offensive is Archer's last stand against Berserker, which is stretched out to a whole episode. This is nothing but pure and unadulterated fan service, but I can accept it because Archer is cool, so he should have an equally cool exit to the story. This is also an excuse to show unlimited blade works since that doesn't happen on screen in the Fate route. Giving him some time to shine and a proper exit was the right call. Even if you don't know what his deal was, his sacrifice is sad and tugs on those heartstrings. Even more so if you do know. The next piece of altered content happens right afterwards in the infamous mana transfer scene. For those unaware, in the original visual novel, to refill Saber's mana, which is running low, Shiro has to... how do I put this in an age-appropriate context for the video? They have to have sex. It's the only way according to Rin, and she's very smart. Now, this isn't some Hollywood blockbuster. You can't just have that in a TV anime, so they rewrote the entire scene. Some physical intimacy is still involved, but instead of transferring mana the traditional way as God intended, Shiro instead transplants his magic circuit into Saber's body. Ironically, both processes involve being inside Saber, but this time it's in a spiritual sense. Shiro then has a trippy dream where a bad CGI dragon shows up and snacks on his arm. It feels like a bizarre fever dream, and I'm surprised Shiro didn't give a little bit more pushback because the idea really comes out of nowhere. This does also affect a later scene between Shiro and Saber. Again, instead of intimacy, they hug and kiss, and Saber is all like, "Thank you, Shiro. Your plentiful hugs and kisses have refilled my stamina, and now I'm ready to fight to the death and destroy the Holy Grail." But who cares about any of that stuff because they added a whole new story arc to the Fate route, although it's not as new as it seems. They take plot points from Unlimited Blade Works and the Heaven's Feel routes and Frankenstein them into an original 3-episode arc. Ilya barges in and is like, "Hey, we should go fight Castor, who is Medea, and her master is your freaky-looking teacher." Ilya, how do you know this? I knew going in they added some elements of other routes, and thankfully it's nothing egregious like having Shiro fight Archer for no reason, or Saber turning evil for an episode. Instead, they take Castor's role from Unlimited Blade Works and retrofit it into the Fate route with a dash of Heaven's Feel. I hate it. Her character arc really doesn't fit here, and you don't feel much sympathy for her since she chooses to kidnap the completely innocent Sakura as a sacrifice and put her into an outfit that is one trenchcoat shy of fitting in the Matrix. Her role in the original was so much better, as you get the basic idea of who Castor is and how cunning she can be. It also gives Saber, Rin, Shiro, and even Ilya some good moments too. But no, we gotta see the assassin fight from Unlimited Blade Works without any of the tension. It also copies Shiro's development from Unlimited Blade Works as he materializes Archer's weapons. That moment has lost all of its significance because he already used Caliburn on Berserker. Why should the viewer care about some rinky-dink daggers when he has already shown more impressive feats? He never uses them again because he never had them in the Fate route to begin with. So really, what was the point? It's completely and utterly unearned, shallow fan service. But the character who was shafted the most was Gilgamesh. The original Castor fight was his introduction in the visual novel, and he does not mess around. He gets straight to business, brutally and sadistically murdering Castor without hesitation. In the anime, the only reason Castor dies is because she tries to protect her master, but there are no pretenses in the visual novel. Gilgamesh is just so powerful, she never stood a chance in the first place. They also try to shoehorn the Sakura Rin connection in out of nowhere. If you're a first time viewer, this is going to make you confused, and probably go to Reddit to ask a question, and that's just horrible. The Unlimited Blade Works and Heaven's Feel elements should have stayed in their own roots. For the most part, I think this anime is an average adaptation. But when they really put that effort in, it's something special. Look no further than the final episode. From beginning to end, it's perfect. The final fight, Saber's goodbye, the scene with Bedivere, all 10 out of 10 adaptations. If the anime could keep this quality consistent, it would be an 11 out of 10 experience. But as it is, it's nothing more than average at best. A completely non-offensive average, but average nonetheless. I know there's a lot of discussion about where to start with Fate, and I do think the anime is a good starting point. It's not perfect, and ideally you should read the visual novel, but if you can't, won't, or don't want to read, this is a suitable substitute. Adaptations are hard to get right, especially when it comes to media that is very text heavy. There's a reason why the phrase, "the book was better," is so common. Books, and by extension visual novels, are special because you're the one reading every word, using them to paint a picture of what the author is trying to show you in your head. That picture can vary from person to person even though we all read the same words. So everyone has slightly different expectations, as opposed to movies and video games where everyone gets the same general experience. This was an uphill battle for the anime from the start. Having only 24 episodes to adapt a whole visual novel route didn't help. Maybe going for 2 seasons would have been the right call. Fate Stay Night 2006 isn't God's gift to anime, but it also doesn't deserve to be forgotten, like it was some kind of mistake. While I don't agree with all of the changes and sporadic pace, I do think that the anime captured 80% of the essence of the Fate route, although I do hope one day they can go back and do a completely faithful adaptation. What I'm really trying to say is that Fate Stay Night 2006 is kinda better than the Tsukihime anime. Kinda better. Next time on Type Moon June, we'll be waving goodbye to another Type Moon June while also revealing the secret of Type Moon June. You don't want to miss that. But to everyone who's made it this far through all 5 of the videos, I want to thank you. It means the world to me, and I say it every year, but you guys are what make Type Moon June so special. Until next time, have a happy Type Moon June.